This broadcast is brought to you by the government of the Republic of Congo.
Last week, CNBC Africa and Forbes Africa, in association with the government of the Republic of Congo, hosted the 2015 All-Africa Innovation Summit in Johannesburg, South Africa, in the lead up to the 2015 All-Africa Games being held in Congo Brazzaville. Key influencers in sport, technology and business gathered on a cold winter's morning to discuss innovation and the role of sport as a driver of economic growth. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the 2015 All-Africa Innovation Summit in association with the government of the Republic of Congo Brazzaville. And talking about innovation and seeing the future, just as a little intro to our first guests, a discussion which I'm very much looking forward to have is 4 years ago, in our third edition, just when we launched, we wrote a piece here which I headlined, I apologise in advance, Could the Next Michael Jordan Jump from Juba? And at the time, people said, like, you know, why are you writing about basketball in this continent? I mean, not enough people are interested. And I said, no, I think it's going to catch on. I think it's an idea. And we did an interview with Mr. Amadou Gallo-Fall. And it took a very long time, I can tell you, we were just talking about it before the thing, to actually get him to shoot a basket with his suit on like that. But I think it goes down in history as one of those great pictures of our time. With the first ever NBA game taking place in Ellis Park Arena in Johannesburg the following day, we kicked off the summit with a discussion on basketball's future in Africa and what it takes to make it in the sport. I was joined by Amadou Gallo-Fall, Managing Director for NBA Africa, Masai Ujiri, President and General Manager for Toronto Raptors, the first ever African to manage a sports team in the United States, and Serge Ibaka, NBA player from Oklahoma City Thunder, who hails from Congo Brazzaville. Your mission in this continent, as I say, when we wrote that story, a lot of people said, like, well, basketball's not big enough for you guys to write about. What's the situation here in 2015?
I'm sure, you know, we're going to wake a lot of people up. So we're always, you know, convinced that this continent was just ripe for, you know, the NBA. We've had a long history here, dating back from Hakeem Olajuwon being drafted #1 overall in 1984. He's a top 50 greatest of all time player in our league. And also now we have guys like Dikembe Mutombo, who's a 17-year NBA veteran from the DRC, our league's global ambassador. And then, you know, over the past decade, we've had a host of young, talented superstars like Serge Ibaka here, who is one of our bright young stars in the NBA. You have guys like Luol Deng. So the number of players from Africa into the NBA have steadily increased. So we saw tremendous potential for basketball development way before 2010 when we opened our office. We launched Basketball Without Borders in 2003. And right here in Johannesburg, where we brought 100 kids from over 35 countries, we saw the potential. So we decided in 2010 to, open an office in order to really cover more ground, get to more countries, present more opportunities to young people, because we knew that all we needed to do is to make our game and our brand accessible. And today we are here talking about the first ever NBA game, or the first ever game or event of this magnitude by any US pro sports league. We are unbelievably excited, and that article, yes, you saw me, and it sounds like many moons ago, but just to see Serge and Masai and really over 400 people, from the NBA family, guests and fans who traveled to South Africa to witness history is a unbelievable feat.
Now, Mr. Masai Ujiri, now you're the first African to be head of a sports team in the United States. Is that correct, or is it just an NBA team?
I think it's
sports.
All sports team. And you're quite interesting because you were born in England, and your father was Nigerian, and your mother was Kenyan.
Yes.
One thing I'm going to ask both of you is, how did you get discovered in this game, especially in this continent?
I think discovered is for maybe like a great player like Serge Ibaka, but I started playing at the age of 13. I was only 9 months old when we moved back to Nigeria. So I grew up in northern Nigeria in Zaria, and at 13 years old, we all played soccer growing up, and discovered the game of basketball, actually walking to play soccer, and we started shooting baskets with a soccer ball, and that's how it all began. Fell in love with an unbelievable game that has taken all of us to a remarkable place, and it's a dream. We all have to pinch ourselves. I think I got the opportunity to be an exchange student, to play at maybe a lower level in college, played pro overseas, but I was one of those pros that wasn't very good, so I had to stop playing early. But the NBA gave me an unbelievable opportunity to work and start a career in scouting, and with great mentors, and I think we all call it working hard. You know, try to move up, and here we are.
So Serge Ibaka of Oklahoma City Thunder, where were you and how did you get discovered?
Well, I started playing Congo Brazzaville. That's where I come from. You know, that's where I'm born. I got my people here too. That's where I started playing basketball. And thank you. And I started to play basketball just in the street in Brazzaville. You know, in Wednesday, my people know, in Wednesday, that's where I started playing basketball, and I fall in love with basketball because my mom and my dad was playing basketball. That's where I started falling in love with basketball, and then I had my first competition with our national team, Diable Rouge, Junior and Durban. That's where, you know, everything started, and the scouting, you know, it was the last NBA scouting out there, and that's where everything started.
Yourself, though, you must accept, Mr. Fall, as popular as the game is. I can tell you, I've reported from this continent for 21 years. I've been in almost every country reporting. If you want to strike up a conversation in this continent, I'm afraid it's still football. I know, because I do it every day. But what I'm saying is that it's still football. A lot of people play basketball, interested, but it's not like normal chat. What are you going to do about that?
Look, we do what we do best, you know. We love football too, you know, and I think there's a mutual admiration at the top level between the top football stars and our NBA stars. LeBron James, for example, is a part owner on a football team. We see David Beckham and DJ Drogba on the court side at our games. So I think really for us, you know, it's fine. It's sports, and you know, it's about really focusing on our product. You know, we have an unbelievable organization in the NBA that is innovative, and also that prides itself in its diversity. You have over 25% of our players coming from outside the United States. And really, to celebrate that diversity, you could see that in this game that we are going to play. And I think, you know, we lead the conversation in social media because our sport and our league is where fashion and music and sport intersect in a seamless way. And I think young people are attracted to the game of basketball in the NBA because our players are global icons. They have different interests. You know, they're not just athletes. These guys are unbelievable human beings. You know, we were just talking backstage. We know what Dikembe Mutombo did, you know, in terms of in the humanitarian space, building a hospital there. You know, our young brother here, Serge, is following in the same footstep. Our interests and our leadership in social responsibility, those are attributes that really takes this outside of the court, you know, so it's not just about bouncing the ball, but our league is focused on really more than just the game, and that's, I think, is attractive. That gets us in the conversation in so many ways, you know, and this is the #2 sport on a global basis, and it's the #2 sport in Africa. But trust me, way before even 4 years ago when that article was there, that I am confident that you know, we are way past a stage where we have to convince people to the values of our game. And actually, you know, when you look at these guys and your Chris Paul, the leadership and the skill set, and you bring that here to inspire our youth, that gets me excited. And the opportunity is unbelievable.
So, Messiah, I ask you, as a manager, you're probably in the best position to tell me. I read back to the intro in our story 4 years ago, and it said that the NBA was packed with African basketball players from here. Is that true? How far true is that?
You know, I think it's a great step for us. A few years ago, we took I think a big step in bringing in the NBA office, and Amadou Fall is obviously the leader. We have to have a movement here, and I think it starts from the NBA players you're talking about. There they are. Lual Deng, Serge Ibaka, Gorgui Deng. There's so many of them in the NBA. But I think it's in the other part of the business part and the coaching part. I think those are the parts that we need to really elevate ourselves. And now you have a lot of assistant coaches from Africa in the NBA. You have a lot of business people in the NBA from Africa. I think the platform is here, and you can give us a platform with all these influential people that are in the room all over Africa, media. It's a sport that we play when we're younger, and we need infrastructure, we need leagues, and these business people, these business leaders, these ministers, these are the guys that can grow the game. These are the same guys that grew the game of soccer. I grew up where there was only 1 or 2 countries playing in the World Cup in soccer, and there were no players in soccer playing overseas, and now we're everywhere. We're beginning to see that in basketball, but we do need businesses, and we do need businessmen and ministers and sports and influential people in Africa to take part, and basketball will grow, and basketball will really overcome, and it's coming.
Serge, what do you see, you know, from the court? In terms of the number of players like yourself, born and bred here in Africa, on any given afternoon on a weekend, how many African players are you seeing in the teams you play?
To start, this is my 6 years in NBA. You know, I remember my first year in NBA. We didn't have a lot of African players, you know. But the good news is, every year, you know, I be checking an NBA draft. I be seeing African players, you know. I remember after I was drafted, 2 years later was Bismarck Miyombo and, you know, those guys. And to me, I feel like Africa, you know, we are starting to going on the way we want to. And NBA Africa, you know, thank God we are NBA Africa here in Africa. That's one of the important things we was looking, you know. And from that, I think Africa be growing up, you know, not only in basketball, in sport in general, you know. I don't remember 2-3 years ago, we had a World Cup here in South Africa, you know, that great thing. And also, like from Africa, I'm proud, man, to have the African game in our country, in Congo Brazzaville. You know, those things, when you see those things, it shows you really, like, in Africa, we're growing up.
Africa owes a big part of its economic growth and development to the richness of its natural resources, its demographic dividend, and rapidly emerging innovation culture. Innovation is fundamental in improving economic growth and the quality of life of all Africans. Countries that fail to innovate will be left behind economically. The second panel discussion looked at African innovations on the horizon. It's a very broad subject, and it's a word that's tossed around quite a lot, especially in the media. People say, oh, innovation, innovation, innovation. So I think perhaps the best to start off with what it means to each of you, starting with you, Mr. Ikalafe.
Well, to me, innovation is really about finding solutions within problems. It is really about creating a new reality. That's what innovation is to me. But in an African context, it is really about reimagining the African reality to the future that we all want to have, the Africa that we want to have.
Louisa Mujela, you're in the investment business, you're in the business. What does innovation mean to you?
Well, for me personally, innovation is doing something different, something that has not been done before, which is exactly what we did when we established our company, Women Investment Portfolio Holdings, because women were in the frills of the mainstream economy. They were not upfront in the financial institutions, and that's how we decided that we will create something, because innovation is being creative, doing something. And secondly, also innovation for me, which is also what we are trying to drive in our small way as a company, is making sure that the model of Wiphold is innovated in other countries in the continent, because we believe that the issues of women are all the same in the continent, whether it's in Maseru or in Banjul or in Lagos. All our issues are the same.
I mean, the creation of your company in itself was an innovation. If I recall our cover story right, I mean, you said there was a time of empowerment and you felt that women needed their own investment vehicle, and yes, you came up with it, and it prospered. Why is it you think sometimes people don't come up with things that obviously sometimes are as big can be? People don't see it, you think?
Well, I do think that people do see it, but it takes courage, it takes passion, it takes determination into what you want to do. I mean, if I may give another example of the passion and the determination, we all know, for instance, that in Africa, women are always out there in the fields working. But why is it that agriculture has not been prioritized as government to say, let's do this in the most innovative and more productive and mechanization of agriculture? And again, for us as a company, that's where we see the innovative way where women can begin to create wealth for themselves, use agriculture as the integral part of their daily lives, because that can be done, that can be achieved.
Charles Key, what does innovation mean to you in your world here?
Well, I guess when it comes to financial services, innovation could simply mean disrupting business as usual. And I guess if you look at what's happening today in the banking industry, in the insurance industry, disruptive technology is probably going to change that whole industry fundamentally, essentially because customers are now more demanding and they want their lives to be taken into account instead of just following what has been done so far without much of a change. And this is really turning the complete face of Africa when it comes to financial services.
Tebe, I mean, what sort of innovations do you think, what oils the wheels, you think, with innovations on this continent? What do you think?
Well, if you look at the two primary areas where innovations has really come through in this continent are certainly in telecommunications and certainly in financial services. And there are two catalytic categories, because those are the categories which have broken down the barriers across the continent and have brought people closer together and ideas together, and have enabled the one big shortcoming of Africa, which is intra-Africa trade. If you look at intra-Africa trade in Africa, only at 12 to 15%. You look at Europe, it's about 70%. And the reason Africa is not growing so much is because we have not been able to trade. So to me, in those two areas, and those are the two areas as well where we've seen some of the biggest brands within Africa. If you look at our Brand Africa 100 survey, where we look at the best brands in Africa, or the most valuable brands in Africa, 80% of the brands that Africans admire are non-African. So meaning that 80% of the African agenda is non-African. But the two areas where we do lead, or in financial services and telecommunications, you look at Safaricom and M-Pesa. because what M-Pesa has done has been really transformative. Because I think the other key for African innovation is about transformation. It's supposed to transform, and M-Pesa has done just that. Whether you go into the countries that it's in, where M-Pesa, the transactions on M-Pesa alone, the total number of transactions are greater than the global transactions on mobile money transfers. I mean, that technology, that innovation has led to 5% are banked in the rural areas in Kenya to 70% in a period of 5 years, from 2006 to 2010. To me, that's where we look at. You look at South Africa, for example, you look at MTN, please call me, and pay as you go. Innovations which have enabled people to be able to communicate.
Ms. Mojela, I mean, you're in the investment business. You must get people all the time coming to you with ideas, maybe sometimes unheard of ideas. What is it like, you know, when you get someone like that who's driven with a passion, who wants to invest? I mean, you're on the hard money side of it. How do you approach that?
Well, the approach is every idea. It's a wonderful idea until it can be implementable. There are many people out there with bright ideas, but so long as the idea is still not bankable, is still not implementable, it's hard, you know, to take forward. This is why, for us, I keep harping on this, because it is something that it could be innovative, but it's something that it is easy to implement. Let the women be brought into the forefront of each and every industry, each and every sector. They must be given the same opportunity as men. If for us to be able to do that, we must wear pants, we'll do so. Because women are just as capable and just as innovative as women can be.
Charles, there's a heavy one. I can see you wearing trousers today, but anyway, okay. But Charles, if I could mention to you, I mean, we interview scores of entrepreneurs at Forbes Africa, and a lot of the stories they tell us, they say they went with their idea to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 financial institutions, and they all said, sorry, no, too much risk for us. We're not going to take it. What's your experience?
Well, I think we have to be bold when it comes to innovation. And I think this is an area where clearly financial institutions have to make a 180-degree shift from what we've seen so far. We can't just expect non-Africans to take care of the African innovation. And as bankers, as financial institutions, we have to be extremely clear as to how we are able to support a new generation of people who are actually bringing that innovation into the field. And I think a very good case in point is what's happening in the mobile banking industry. What people don't realize is that the most recent innovations have actually occurred in Africa. If you look at Eastern Africa, for instance, this is where all sort of new, cutting-edge products and solutions are being brought to the market by African and led by Africans. Sometimes, obviously, supported by financial institutions, probably sometimes not the case, but the reality is that the only way we can see those solutions being widespread at the scale of the continent is when the financial institutions play their role in supporting such.
I want to add on to that. I says the other important thing is that as Africans as well, in order to be able to transcend, to be able to innovate, we first need to have a strong sense of self, a strong sense of identity. Because one of the biggest stumbling blocks of creativity or innovation in Africa is that lack of understanding of who we are, respect of who we are, and celebration of who we are. Because the source of innovation starts with an identity of who you are first.
I mean, one thing, Ms. Mojela, I must say to you, I mean, one of the things we have covered is impact investment, so-called, in innovations, in these kind of things. Do you think this is mere philanthropy, or is it good business, do you think?
It is a good business, but it can be philanthropy. But why is it a good business? For instance, in the banking industry, I still don't, banking industry and the insurance industry, I still don't understand why they are still so reluctant in coming up with innovative products that can ensure the people out there in the rural areas. There is nothing that says if you have 100 cattle and 100 sheep, you are not wealthy. But we'll never get insurance simply because the financial institutions, they don't see you as a client. They would rather insure someone in the big cities. So things like those, they really need to come up with some innovative product as to how do we support and ensure that businessmen out there in the rural area can also be covered, because we all don't have to flock into the cities to be business people. He's rearing his cattle, he's rearing his sheep and cat and chickens. So assist him in making sure that you can package the insurance. There's lightning, there's all sorts of things that, you know, as a business person, he might not be in a position to. So the impact can be there, and the impact can be business related more than philanthropy.
But I think that's what I said. You have to view creativity through the African reality prism. So rather than trying to impose, if you will, global ways of looking at Africa, look at African reality and then innovate from that perspective. I think what you're talking about is really talking to that.
Exactly.
We look at
we're mixed.
We're mixed indeed, and that's why I say it starts with understanding who you are, celebrating who you are, and innovating from that point. Because I think the lack of confidence in who we are is a major stumbling block in how we can progress as a continent.
It's time for a short ad break. When we return, we discuss sports as a driver of economic growth. Stay tuned. Welcome back to this special on the 2015 All Africa Innovation Summit. The last panel discussion for the morning looked at sports as a driver for economic growth. The panelists included Minister of Sports and Recreation in South Africa, Fikile Mbalula, US Ambassador for South Africa, Patrick Gaspar, Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for the NBA, Pam Eel, and CEO for South African Tourism, Thulani Nzima.
I said in the intro, it's no longer just a weekend thing for people to run around and keep fit. Now it's a big business. And the question is, hosting sport, creating sportsmen, is it driving the economy? If so, how? If not, more. So if I could just start off with you, Ms. L. Yield, to my right.
Yes, sir.
I shall just say to you, this idea of bringing the NBA into Africa, I mean, what is the economic thinking behind it?
Well, as we've been talking all morning, people all over the world have a passion for basketball. They actually have a passion for sport, but we believe basketball is the best sport. And we believe bringing the sport to Africa, we will get new fans. We believe those fans will follow the game as they do all over the world. And we believe we can grow the game in the continent of Africa. We know that fans start very small. You put a basketball in the hand of a child, they'll become a fan of the game for life. And when that happens, the game allows you to grow the economy. The game allows you to bring business and more tourism into your country. And we're very, very happy to do that. This game that we're going to have Saturday is so historic. The first NBA game on the continent of Africa. That's amazing, first off. But we've been here for years. We've been here at least 13 times with our Basketball Without Borders. And our thinking is it's about the children, and you start with the children, and you find the next Serge Ibaka who wants to play the game, and then you get the members of that country to follow the game. And that's how it works.
Minister Mbalula, you're a legislator on this continent. What do you feel about a new sport trying to put down roots here? What's the government's point of view?
Well, thank you, Chris. I think we in South Africa have got a first-hand experience about the importance of sports when it comes to the economy, from hosting mega events and also enhancing and building a new infrastructure. In fact, through sports and the World Cup in particular, we have been able to mitigate, the unforeseen objective reality of the economic meltdown, where in which through the infrastructure development and what we have actually gained through the World Cup, mitigated those circumstances where in which our economy could have found itself in a total state of collapse. And we have been able to generate, foreign investment, and also through tourism, numbers of people come into our country, which under normal circumstances, they wouldn't have actually come. Of course, tourism will speak. We do have numbers all the time, but it's not compared to mega events because those people come here to spend, to enjoy themselves. And this is the importance of sport. And the fact that sports have just been that aspect in the back burner of governments in terms of its importance. And that always there is an argument that in the varied, budgets of government, sport is not a priority and so on. But, hosting events and so on have changed to that altitude altogether.
Mr. Gaspar, as an ambassador, looking almost, if you like, from the outside in, even though I understand you were born on this continent, do you think, just looking even at the 2010 World Cup, which the ministers alluded to, as a non-resident here before, did it put this country and this continent on the map for you? Do you think it's had a big effect?
Well, Chris, first I'll say that I don't feel as if I'm an outsider looking in. I feel like a Soweto boy by now after 2 years in this amazing country. But there's no doubt, it's incontrovertible that the World Cup absolutely had positive impacts on the perceptions of South Africa globally. There was certainly a spike in tourism that was sustained for years after. I would just add, Minister, that we need to promulgate policies that will continue to encourage that tourism and not retard the tourism, but that's a conversation for a different day. But I do think that it has certainly enhanced the stature of South Africa globally. Now, one could spend a lot of time arguing about whether or not infrastructure development around sports can continue to be sustained and really drives economic development in a country, but there's something that you really can't argue. I want to tell you a little story about the United States. We all know, of course, that globally sports tourism is a $600 billion industry. That's both hard tourism and soft tourism dollars. And in the United States, sports is a $70 billion annual business that employs 500,000 Americans. But away from the big lights of the NBA and the NFL and our hockey leagues and baseball, something much more interesting is happening at the grassroots level that I think speaks volumes to what can happen here in South Africa and throughout the African continent. If we go back a ways to 1972, when the United States passed the Title IX resolution that said that we can no longer discriminate against girls in sports if an institution is receiving federal funding, we went from a time in our country where girls participated at a rate of only 1 in 27 in primary school sports and in high school sports. 4 years later, that was 1 in 4. Today, girls in America participate at exactly the equal rate that boys do at the basic education level and at the university level as well. What does this have to do with economic development? This is the important part as we get to Women's History Month in South Africa in the next few days. We've seen in the United States, there's a study by the University of Pennsylvania Business School and many other studies that confirm this. We've seen that over a lifetime, over a career, young girls that participated in sports earn on average 8% more in their wages than girls who did not participate in sports. They're 3% more likely to attend university, and they have a higher degree of participation in non-traditional employment for women. That's hugely important in the United States, has been an economic driver in communities, and when one considers that we have a youth unemployment rate in South Africa of about 50%, same applies continent-wide, you can understand what benefits this could have for young women and ultimately for communities throughout sub-Saharan Africa. I think that's a part of the economic development engine in sports that's neglected and really should be elevated in the conversation.
Okay. Okay. So, Mr. Nzima, you're in charge of the brand. You're in charge of how South Africa appears overseas. Sports, does it make your job easier or does it not?
Well, I think it has made my job much easier. If you look at the 2010 FIFA Soccer World Cup that we hosted, as my minister has alluded to, it gave us more benefits than we ever thought. The marketing exposure that we got is nothing that a marketing budget could have covered. We were able to address various issues such as all concerns about safety and security. A lot of you will know that when we hosted the Soccer World Cup, we had an incident-free tournament. Apart from the fact that it gave us an opportunity to showcase the tourism products in the country.
And apart from the handball by Suarez against Ghana, that was an incident in my book. And about yours, carry on. Sorry.
It helped us to also sustain interest in the tournament, by the way. When we had that and the miss that we had in the penalty shootout. But the important thing for us is the fact that we used sport to expose the country in various ways. We have a lot to offer in this country. A lot of people thought South Africa is just a safari destination. But during the Soccer World Cup, we used the opportunity to showcase other tourist products. A lot of people were exposed to the townships, and in fact, during the opening game, I went to Soweto for lunch with my colleagues. The Sowetans were outnumbered by foreigners that were there. And then after the Soccer World Cup, a lot of foreigners got lost deliberately in Soweto because they started to enjoy the country. But we also had a lot of people then discovering the history of this country. What delivered democracy to this country is very, very important, that people got exposed to the footsteps of Nelson Mandela. From a tourism point of view, in terms of numbers, what the Minister was talking about is very true. In 2010, we had a 15% growth in tourism into the country. We had about 315,000 people who came here just for the Soccer World Cup. And if you look at the attendance at the various stadia, the number was quite big. So that was very important. The economic contribution to the country was huge. The infrastructure that we built during the Soccer World Cup, our road infrastructure, the telephone communication system that already existed, also an additional number of decent hotel rooms that were put in the country, that's phenomenal. We also built a lot of infrastructure insofar as conference facilities are concerned. So the opportunity that was created then, and especially addressing some of the concerns that people had about the country, were dealt with very easily during the Soccer World Cup. Don't forget that in 1995, we also hosted the Rugby World Cup, and we followed that with the Africa Cup of Nations. In 2013, we also hosted the Africa Cup of Nations, generating 730,000 attendances during that period. So these are the kind of things that have dispelled some of the myths that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to deal with as South African tourism. If you look at our job at a very simplified level, we deal with creating awareness about the country and also converting attitudes about the country in terms of positivity. It's one thing to be aware of the country, but it's another in terms of how do you perceive the country. If you are negative about it, then that is the kind of challenge that we have to deal with.
But Minister, I have to put it to you. I mean, you're in the public firing line. 5 years on, people are still complaining, saying, no, there was too much money spent on stadiums, there were too many stadiums, they're not being used. You know the arguments on the radio probably better than I do. What do you say to that as the Minister?
No, look, we were not clever like the Chinese. When the Olympics were finished, they dismantled everything and turned it into a flea market. We didn't have that experience.
Would you ever consider something like that?
We would have considered something like that. One of the viable stadiums of the World Cup we have is Durban, Moses Mabhida Stadium.
I've been there.
Because that stadium, I think, was built not only for World Cup, but even beyond that. Now we're going to host the Commonwealth. Sorry. It's still to be awarded, lest we be accused of bribing. If we host the Commonwealth Games in Durban, you will see that there's less expenditure on the infrastructure because the World Cup infrastructure of Moses Mabhida was, multiple purpose, and It is not only just people coming playing football and all of that. And that's what killed us, because we didn't have experience. I'll be the first to admit that most of those stadiums are actually lying there as white elephants. If the Springboks, Bafana, and the PSL teams are not playing there, there's no movement. There's nothing happening in those stadiums. And it's not like a nightmare, but we're still thinking with the municipalities what we're going to do with those stadiums that are inviable for us, but at the same time, we're running them at a huge cost. That is part of the experience we didn't have. But if you can ask me tomorrow for the next World Cup or the next Olympics, which South Africa will host, I might not be Minister of Sports then. I think we'll take the Chinese experience. Thank you.
And just one other quick question for you, Mr. Nzim, for an answer. Again, on the World Cup front, a lot of people are saying as well, a lot of hotel rooms were created, a lot of accommodation was created in this country for the World Cup, and now there's a, what's the word I'm looking for, plethora of it. There's too much around. Isn't that a problem?
Well, that was expected to happen in terms of the anticipation of the numbers that we thought we'd get. But don't forget that South Africa was very fortunate in the sense that we hosted the Soccer World Cup during the global economic meltdown. Had it not been for that, Minister Mbalula has already alluded to the fact that we had foresight or the benefit of the Soccer World Cup. But given the fact that it was hosted in the middle of the economic meltdown, it was not possible that we will be able to retain the numbers that came to watch the Soccer World Cup. The Soccer World Cup was an event that happened over 2 months, and that was it. So the infrastructure that we built obviously needed to be supported by tourism that will follow that. If you look at the history of the Soccer World Cup, all the countries that have hosted the Soccer World Cup will naturally have growth in tourism at the rate of about 20% immediately following that. We couldn't sustain that number because of the global economic challenges. What then happened is that the infrastructure that we have added in terms of the number of rooms started feeling the pressure, and we saw a trading down of the various aspects of the products. The 5 stars were trading down to the 4 stars, and the 4 stars down to the 3 stars, and that kind of vicious cycle started happening. But I think as a country, we have done very well, because immediately after the Soccer World Cup, we still grew our tourism by about 7%. And subsequent to that, we continue to outstrip the global tourism growth, until now, where we're getting to a point where we are leveling out in terms of the base that we are growing on. But we think that also the diversification of how we present South Africa as a tourist destination, the fact that we are now beginning to look a lot more in terms of the business event side of it, is definitely filling up the valleys in terms of the infrastructure and the accommodation that's available.
Ambassador, if I could come to you now. I mean, this idea of successful sports teams and sports stars creating growth and prestige for countries. On the diplomatic front, I mean, obviously it's your area. Is it really the case in this cynical age, in the fact that if you've got a world star soccer player, rugby player, that diplomats, other countries, assign more prestige to your country if you produce that star? Is that the case?
Well, I just want to back up for a second, if I could, and I don't believe in ever being on a stage without stirring the pot just a little bit. So if I could, I want to just disagree with my brother for a second, if I can. Sure. I actually think that for a period following the World Cup, South Africa did a very, very good job of sustaining the growth and development from the World Cup. And if you look at what's happened around the world following the economic downturn, tourism is actually on an upswing. We have more tourism dollars being spent in major capitals around the world, and South Africa should, in my opinion, be at a point where it's continuing to grow at the pace that it did 2 years ago. I think that policies that have been promulgated through Parliament and elsewhere have contributed to the downward pressure on tourism in the country, and I think that really needs to be said, and we all need to work together as friends to litigate that and work through some of the challenges.
Look to my left.
He's got all the power, doesn't he?
Look to the authority on the left.
To the authority. I just wanted to put that out. Yeah. But on your other question,
do you think so?
On your other question, I think that, I mean, let's look at England, where sports tourism accounts for 2% of GDP. It's actually higher than what agriculture contributes to their economy. And when you consider that Man U is worth, what, $2.5 billion, I think that does say something about the prestige of a sports organization being able to lift up the prestige of a region. But I don't want to, despite the fact that I'm a huge cheerleader for all sport, and certainly for the NBA, I think that we shouldn't paper over some of the really challenging questions that exist. I have to applaud the minister for being candid and forthright about the infrastructure challenges that have existed with these behemoth stadiums after the fact. And we should commend our friends from Congo Brazzaville who were up here earlier, who talked about the ways they're right now planning for the use of those stadiums with partnerships with universities after the fact. That's terribly important. We've built many stadiums in the United States with a lot of these questions being asked, and one might suggest that there are alternative uses for tax dollars other than just sports development. Don't want to paper over that, but there are clear instances where tourism has expanded after huge victories or after huge events have been hosted by a country, and that's had spillover effects into the rest of the economy.
Well, I'm going to ask
and please don't forget what I put out front about the participation of young women in the economy is driven by sports. That matters.
Okay. Minister, I'm going to ask you in a second who pays the ferryman when it comes to sports and growth. But first, Ms. Eel, if I could ask you a question. I mean, there's no doubt that a lot of the sports people, they get on, etc. We've seen this morning Serge Ibaka, people from Africa getting on. My fear is that if you look at sports people, I mean, look at the Boateng brothers who play football. One plays for Germany, one plays for Ghana. Now, are the children of those sports stars who go to Europe or America, are they going to come back to this continent and play? Are they going to come back and coach? Or are they going to be sucked in by the riches and the prestige? That's the thing that you've got to answer, I think, on this one.
I think the example is what's happening this week here. A lot of us are here from the NBA. A lot of us are here for the first time. I'm here for the first time. But the thing that's been so impressive to me are the stars that were born in Africa that came back with us to uplift the children that are here. Masai was on the panel earlier, and I watched him on Tuesday not only teach these young, aspiring 15 to 17-year-old boys how to hold a basketball, but he was teaching them how to hold their heads high. And he was not only trying to teach them how to make a layup, but how to have confidence in themselves. And he also, along with the other players, were actually teaching them that there is the possibility for you to do what we did, to go on to make your dreams come true, just like Sina this morning, but also come back and give back to your countries. Those guys wouldn't be here if they didn't believe in that. And I think they went on to follow their passions. They went on to make their living as their parents would have wanted them to do. And many of them, as you've seen, are back here this week. And not only this week, but weeks in the past and years in the past and hopefully years in the future to do exactly that, to help uplift the children. And it's a core value of the NBA to do that everywhere that we go. And we realize the potential in this continent, so we're going to continue to do that here.
Minister, when it comes to sport and growth, who do you think should be footing the bill? Should it be the state or should it be private money?
Well, I think it should be a private state partnership. It shouldn't just be the state. I mean, we have that experience here in South Africa that sports, in the main, you've got many volunteers. But it is the private sector in the main that plays a part in terms of sustaining jobs within sports. Without them, I mean, sports is doomed. I mean, we're starting the basketball league here in South Africa now. There is no private, investment in that. But I know with private investment in the long term, basketball in South Africa will be up there among the best nations in the world. And I think the state has got to lay the basis. and also focus on development, which is what I do as a Minister of Sports. My budget is not billions. I'm fighting for recognition, and I'm also fighting for a space and arguing and mobilizing state to invest more in sport, because sport drives social cohesion and nation building. When sport becomes important to, among others, politicians and other people, is when there is a big game. Minister, can you give me free tickets? And that's why I tell them I'm not a minister of tickets. I'm a minister of sports and recreation. And I told my colleagues in cabinet, which I left them in Cape Town, that no, you say sport is not a priority. I'm not giving you tickets for one, NBA, and also Carlin Black Label. Pay to come and watch, because we're not a priority. But just to tease them in a way. And I think here in South Africa we have been able to convince government that there's the importance of investing more in sport. Even the apartheid government, when it wanted to change the mindset of South Africans and the youth in particular, and slow them down in terms of politics, to depoliticize them, they used sport. And they had this huge program which was Win Heart and Minds, but rolling out infrastructure in the schools. And we can do better in the democratic process. And this is what I'm advocating for.
The 11th African Games will happen in just a few weeks' time in Brazzaville, Congo. This edition marks the 50th anniversary of the Games, as well as their return to Brazzaville, which hosted the first edition in 1965. We caught up with the Minister of Sports for the Republic of Congo, Leon Alfred Opimba, and Minister of Infrastructure for the Republic of Congo, Jean-Jacques Bouya, to discuss the readiness of the country for this sporting spectacle.
Okay. So regarding the investment which have been put on the construction of all the sports infrastructure in the country, it was a significant investment mainly done by our government, and the government believed that it was worthy investment because it's an investment in the development of the youth, it's an investment in the promotion of the African culture, it's an investment in the development of the sports, not only in our country, but also in the whole continent, to showcase what is the capability of the African continent with regard to sport throughout the world. So we believe that it's a long-term investment and it was worth making it.
Minister, with that, I think I would like to ask, how important is it that Africa continues to attract big tournaments, global tournaments like the FIFA World Cup, for example? And it's one thing to want to have these tournaments here, but on an infrastructure side, are we ready to host and facilitate these conferences?
So we believe that the African continent cannot always be sidelined when it comes to hosting big events, just because we don't always have the right infrastructure at the time. So we believe that it's important for our continent to invest in this kind of infrastructure, to invest in hosting this kind of events, especially since in a field like the field of sports, the youth of Africa need some role model, they need inspiration. Today we are talking about the NBA. In the NBA we got Congolese like Serge Ibaka who are playing, who are very well known. So in order to assist in the promotion of this type of personality, to assist into the development of our people so that our youth can get inspired, so that our youth can do as the others are dreaming, it's important for this kind of investment. So it's not that the African continent doesn't have the resources. If there's a possibility to do anything of such, to host such events, then we need to put our resources into this kind of investment. And it's good for Africa to promote our talent and to promote further opportunities for the youth.
Minister, earlier on the Sports Minister of South Africa told us how he battles to get money from Cabinet to put into the sports portfolio. I just wanted to understand, is it the same in your position? Do you also battle amongst your fellow government peers to convince them that more money needs to be invested in sporting initiatives?
So usually common knowledge that in African countries essentially the sport not always get the attention that it deserves. It's always the last coach of the trend. That is a common fact in most of our African countries, because in our priority, it's not usually what comes on the first. But in this specific case, with regard to the organization and the development of our infrastructure to be used for the African Games, we have a head of state who have been a visionary, who for the past years have given the necessary instructions so that enough money be put into the development of those infrastructure and on the program leading to the organization of the game, so that our commitment fit the requirement of the African Union and of the international standard with regard to the organization of this type of event.
So at the end of it all, this may usher in a new era for sport and growth in Africa.
This broadcast is brought to you by the Government of the Republic of Congo.